Welcome to BIGtalk, a series of power talks by industry and thought leaders that inspire progress and unlock innovation. BIGtalk, unlocking the next big thing.
Thank you, Mr. Ndebele. I think that's the first time I've called you that. But it does sound good. And thank you very much, Heather, for setting the tone. Because really what we're talking about at both universities and schools in Zimbabwe is how to be relevant and also how to be competitive all at the same time. Whether we're in primary school, secondary school, high school, and tertiary education or higher education, these are the issues, the current issues right now. And what I want to take you through now, within that context that Heather has set, is just the practical side of the issue, where I will not go into esoteric professorial type of discourse where we talk about all these advanced theories that cannot land on any ground. But I just want to say, what do we want to put on the ground and get things to happen in Zimbabwe in terms of higher and tertiary education? That is what the government has set our challenges on and said we are challenged to introduce what they call Education 5.0. Alternatively, for us in the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education and as well as Science and Technology Development, it is a question of University 5.0. So I decided to advertise it as that, but now I'm kind of unpacking it by putting the title like that, where I say we're talking about a higher and tertiary education 5.0. Now, a university, a traditional university is what they call a university 3.0 because it has three pillars. You're going to be a competent university teacher, which is another word, another term for a professor. If you can teach satisfactorily in some universities, excellently in others, research excellently, and also do some community service on the side. I think from what I just described there or listed, you can see where the priorities lie for most universities. Research, research, research and publish, research and publish. And aim for leading journals and leading conferences. So these are the three. And what Zimbabwe now needs is an entrepreneurial university, to use that old French term, an innovative university, a university out of which businesses can spin off and go their independent ways. And thus these 5 pillars that you see on the right of the screen. So this is the challenge that the government has put in front of us, and I will spend half of the talk just explaining this context to some that may not have been exposed to it. Some industrialists. Let's see anyone who is an industrialist here. Industrialists. You may have been at the conference in December 2017. No, you are not. Well, then just join the crowd. You're going to learn a little bit about what the government is dreaming of in this case, and see how universities are taking it in and translating it into practice, into something practical, both public and private universities are doing this. So let me unpack University 5.0. That did not go. Okay, let me do it again. There. Okay, we're looking at those first three. We have to redefine those things. Teaching and learning. You can't just be talking of teaching alone, because this is a two-way street. You are teaching, the student is learning, the student says something and you probably learn, and the student is teaching. So this is an interactive sort of game that we play, especially at tertiary and university education. So you're basically trying to simplify teaching and learning using any local language to explain technological concepts. Say umthanyelo instead of saying broom, or whatever other language term you want to choose. And then you're talking about something that the child can relate to at home. And now you are bringing it to another conceptual level. And you can take these things to just about any cognitive level you want. But by first of all simplifying the concepts and bringing them to the child's experience, and then you can take the child from there and raise him up, and raise her up. And research is basically focusing on a culture conscious or a resource or a heritage conscious type of research, development and engineering to generate these new ideas, innovative ideas or novel ideas. Scholarly community engagement is what I call, what has traditionally been called community service. See, when a professor, a renowned professor, was all over the world impressing colleagues at conferences and writing to these journals that they have all these high performance indices, you say, give some community service, you require that. They look at that as something you do on the side, in your leisure time. They don't take it as seriously as these other two, teaching and learning and research. And what we've done in some universities, and this is what I'm bringing to NAST, is one of the reasons I'm here at NAST. I'm saying, let's talk of it as scholarly engagement. Why should you leave your scholarly and your scholarly contribution in journals and at conferences and not bring it to the community and interact with them on their terms? They have needs, they know their needs, you probably don't, because you spend so much of your time doing these other things. And you engage with the community. Actually, you are more useful to that community as a catalyst, where you actually raise consciousness of the nature of the problems that they face. And sometimes that's all you need to do. And they can come up with solutions like that. And you work through these things. Now you are part of the community. You are now speaking the same language. Because you just had to light the spark, and the community can actually teach you something that is locally relevant. And yet you can now help them to raise that to a standard that is globally competitive. We do the same with the students we teach. We want to create curricula for them, create learning environments for them that make them locally relevant, not just white collar as we used to call it, but they should also be globally competitive, so that whatever theories and new ideas they come up with, whether in industry, in service areas, or in academia, those should be locally relevant and globally competitive. That's what that's been our mantra at UCT. But at NAST, we're saying think in other terms when you are faced with a challenge. Wake up. Wake up. Okay, there we go. Innovation and business development are the new pillars of a vibrant university that is contributing to its community. This is nothing really new. It's just that somehow universities in Africa were teaching people to be clever. These are people that can talk about ideas. The most they can come towards implementing those ideas is analyzing these problems. We analyze the problems and show people in how deeply they are in trouble. And then we leave them more troubled than before. Didn't I say to you in class when we were talking about these things that we want you to be problem solvers? When you find people in a very bad state, you should leave them in a better state. You should solve problems. You should help people solve problems. And innovation means thinking in other terms, teaching and experimenting to produce new knowledge and taking them to what we call innovation hubs. And I'm going to talk more about these later. And then the issue of business developments. Once you've brought something to an innovation hub where you are showing some pilot products, you are showing the business case, you are building a business case for some of this stuff. It's time to now go to the business development stage, where you now take them to what we call industrial parks, business parks, technology parks, science parks. Different terms are used in different contexts to describe these things. But this is where now you are incubating new businesses, or even for old businesses, new lines of business. Because somebody might want to diversify. They are thinking of this concept, but they are not quite sure whether they will be taking too much of a risk. In other words, then we have to also teach our students about risk management issues and things like that, so that when they develop new ideas, they can actually expose what shortcomings these new product lines might have. And you help the business person to take corrective measures, or rather protective measures against the risk that they are taking. Now, there is a set of governing principles, just 4, that the government is using. I'm still on the government side of things. What they call Education 5.0 is their government principle, and is based on these. Using education, science, technology development to attain Vision 2030. That's the United Nations Millennium Development set of goals. And universities in particular are addressing goal number 16. And these are some of the components of that goal. Translating that vision into action. And this is where we've had serious shortcomings in African university education. You learn to talk about these things, write about them, but how do you take them from that platform to the implementation stage? Instituting a transitional stabilization program in higher and tertiary education, science and technology development. This is what the finance minister keeps harping at for all the ministries that are implementing these changes in the way we govern ourselves. And firmly grounding our philosophy in our natural heritage, a set of guiding principles. They call this the doctrine, and there is a little book there that they produced that they call it. The title is simply that: doctrine, and it's based on these 4 things. Now, let me take it another step. Okay, we're talking about transition. A transition, this is the way the government put it, illustrated it. Where you are looking at teaching, that's the traditional thing we do. Research, community service, innovation, industrialization. And the universities in Zimbabwe are supposed to really flower into their glory as some of the top universities in the world when they can achieve all 5. Now, where I was before I came to NUST, we realized that it would be foolhardy to jump into innovation and industrialization before changing the way we look at teaching, research, and community service. We had to now come up with some metrics for measuring performance in all 3 of these for University 3.0 or Education 3.0. So that a leading scholar has to be excellent in all 3 of them. You can't just have satisfactory teaching and be promoted on that basis. Research, of course, the metrics have been there for years. But community service was the last frontier to be tackled, where there are now metrics for measuring your quality of community service, a scholarly edge to it. And that changes the game altogether and poises the university for innovation and industrialization, because first of all, you apply your innovation, your innovative thinking, and your innovative teaching to these 3. Once you know how to do that, then you can extend to actually leading from the lab and the classroom to the innovation hub. At the innovation hub, you start interacting with interested industrialists, and you help them to create a business plan, a business model for the products that you are developing. And I'll come to how NUST is actually translating all of that. Now, you have 4 things that you must do. You must have infrastructure development. Now, before I started tackling this issue at NUST, when I thought of infrastructure development, I simply thought about those buildings with the crane that has been there for the last 2 decades, only moving when the wind blows. That's all that was on my mind. But then once I was on the ground, I noticed that, hey, the infrastructural problems at NUST were multiple. You're looking at promotion infrastructure. How do you decide that somebody should be promoted? And NUST is the least ready institution to promote anyone. And people leave NUST to other universities in Zimbabwe and get promoted instantly. But NUST, what sort of criteria do we establish? Physical infrastructure, financial infrastructure. All of those things need to be applied and set up properly for development. So I'm going to go through each one of them and illustrate some of the problems we face there.